Hey, welcome to another in the series of foundational figures in computer science. This one's about Alan Turing. I think it's really important for computer science majors to have some notion of who developed the science of computer science. So this one's going to talk about one of the founding fathers, as he's known, of computer science, Alan Turing. So here's a picture of him at age 16. He lived in Great Britain and lived during the World War II timeframe, where he was instrumental in breaking the Enigma code, which is an encryption scheme used by the Germans during World War II. So he was one of the early cryptographers and also a brilliant mathematician. Interesting human history story also. So let's get into talking about Alan Turing a bit. So he lived during this time frame. He was born before World War I and died after World War II. And he's considered now one of the, at least, fathers of computer science and artificial intelligence, which is a field that's been around for 30 or 40 years, maybe, in the limelight at least, artificial intelligence. But he was one of the original people to think about these issues back in the 1930s. So he was a computer scientist, find my little pointer here, one of the early computer scientists, probably before there was the term computer scientist, brilliant mathematician, a crypto kind of person, cryptanalysis, cryptographer, and I didn't know this until researching him recently, that he was also a theoretical biologist. He's mostly known for these three things. So he was, like I say, in Great Britain. He went to King's College in Cambridge, starting in 1931, and just 4 years later became a fellow. Not quite sure what that means, except they must have thought he was a pretty smart guy, which he was. Now, during World War II, his most famous involvement was he worked on cracking the Enigma code. Now, what is the Enigma code? Well, there's a machine the Germans developed in the 1930s to encrypt military messages that they would send to ships and also units of soldiers to give them plans and where to go to and stuff. And it was encrypted using this machine. And the Allies couldn't decrypt it. Here's how it worked. Had a keyboard and a bunch of lights, and basically the operator typed in the message in the keyboard. Each time the person typed in a letter, a light with a letter would come on, but it would be in general a different letter, and it was way more complicated than just the Caesar cipher that we've studied in this book, because the association or the substitution between the letters and the encrypted message, which would be shown on the lamp board, was determined by a series of three rotors. I think later it got changed to 4 rotors, but this one has 3. And these rotors affected the correspondence between the clear text coming in and the cipher text coming out. Every time you typed a letter, this rotor would move 1 notch, which would change the association. In addition, there was a plug board with a bunch of wires that could also change the association. So in order to decrypt the message, the soldier at the other end of receiving this message would also have to have an Enigma machine with the rotors set up in the same way and the plug board set up in the same way in order to decrypt the message. So it's a pretty complicated encryption scheme. And so the people that were working on breaking this code were a team of top mathematicians in England at Bletchley Park. And here's a picture of the building they were in. And Turing worked there for 2 years between 1939 and 1940. Actually, he worked there for way longer than that. He moved to a different hut 8, apparently, after living in this building. So his job with this team of people that he worked with, and he was the lead mathematician, the job was to break the Enigma code. And by the way, they did. And spoiler alert, people think that he saved about 2 years of World War II, or his team did, by breaking the code so the Allies could decrypt the message. Okay, let's see what we have next. So in honor of Turing, there's a plaque there that, depending on who you read, they would say, with hindsight, that by breaking or cracking the Enigma code, that it saved 2 to 4 years of World War II, and obviously saved many lives if it shortened the war by that number of years. Now, one of the things that he developed during his lifetime was something that he called the Turing test. And its goal was to try and define what would be an intelligent machine. And his definition, which isn't the only one, was to put a computer in one room and a human interrogator in another room, and they're connected by a teletype machine. And the interrogator would ask questions via the teletype machine of the computer, and if it passed the Turing test, then the human interrogator could not tell the difference between if the subject at the other end was human or a machine. And if they couldn't tell, then that machine passed, quote, passed the Turing test. This test has still not been met today, although in narrow areas, like there's been computers that are programmed to be like played psychoanalyst, and in a narrow area like that, they are pretty good at giving answers that would make it difficult to discern a human from a machine. But in the total general world of any possible subjects, this is a pretty tough test. Has not been met yet today. Now, you've seen when you visit the web, whenever you create an account, you often get one of these CAPTCHAs. And this actually is interesting because it relates to Turing. So you know how when you create a new account, you get one of these things and you have to type in S, M, W, M, and some of them are much harder to read than this. And the reason that they do this is that the website wants to determine if it's a human or a computer at the other end, because they're trying to prevent a computer program from creating a millions of accounts on their website. So whenever you create a website, you usually get one of these. The reason this test works is it turns out that humans are really good at being able to distinguish the letters, even if they're really distorted, have lines through them, and overlap. But believe it or not, even with sophisticated computers and algorithms, it's pretty hard to write a program that can look at this image, this graphical image, and discern the letters. And by the way, did you ever wonder what CAPTCHA stood for? Here's what it stands for: completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. Completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. So see how important he was? He's still in the acronym of CAPTCHA and the idea of a Turing test. Okay, let's see what we have next here. Unfortunately, he had a really tragic life in spite of his incredible technical and career successes, because after World War II, in England, it was illegal and a criminal act to be a homosexual. And in 1952, he was arrested and prosecuted under this thing as a criminal act. And he had two choices, I guess: go to jail or accept a treatment. Of course, we look back with this today as incredibly inhumane, but this is what they did in 1952. So they were trying to cure him of being a homosexual by giving him injections, chemical injections, as an alternative to prison. There's been a movie about Turing in recent years. I think it was called The Enigma Code. I saw it a while ago. And he died 2 years after this. His last few years of life were tragic. If you see the movie, you'll be moved. And most people believe he committed suicide by cyanide poisoning Although there's been some speculation that maybe he was poisoned or accidentally poisoned, but it's not clear. I think he probably committed suicide, but it could have been some other reason, except he did get poisoned by cyanide. So here's a few references about this really important person. I got most of my information for this little video from Wikipedia. There's also an 8-minute YouTube video at this web address. If on YouTube you search for Alan Turing, you'll find many documentaries ranging from short to hour-length ones that have been on TV. There's been many books written by or about Alan Turing. I've read one biography several years ago. So if you search around on Amazon or wherever and you're interested, you can find loads of material about this really famous person, the father of computer science. And I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about this person. So now when somebody says Alan Turing, you say, oh, I know about that person. And then when they say, oh, do you know about the Turing test? You can say, oh, sure, I know about that. I studied that in cybersecurity. Okay, well, hope you enjoyed learning a little about Alan Turing.